12 years ago, Rowena was completely erased by her own family, cast out without explanation, stripped of her place, her name, and her future. There were no phone calls, no birthday cards, not even a holiday text. It was as if she'd never existed. The final blow came when she discovered that her own mother, Vivian, had forged a DNA test to legally cut her out of the family will. Her identity was deleted with one cold, calculated move. Not only was she emotionally exiled, but she was financially eliminated, disinherited, and framed as if she wasn't even blood. Her sister Calla stepped into her place as the family's shining star, the chosen one, while Rowena's name became taboo. Yet what hurt the most wasn't just the betrayal. It was how deliberately it was done. No accident. No misunderstanding, just quiet, ruthless removal. From that moment on, Rowena vanished from their world, left to rebuild a life from nothing while they carried on like she'd never existed. I stood at the kitchen sink, water trickling through my fingers, sunlight casting gentle stripes across the floor. The moment I saw the invitation, cream-colored, heavy with expensive ink and old memories, I knew something was off. My hands trembled slightly as I turned the envelope over. It bore my name, Rowena, in calligraphy so familiar it chilled me. My mother's handwriting. No return address, no personal note. Just the names, Calla and Desmond Hale, embossed in gold foil like a coronation notice. I hadn't spoken to anyone in that family for 12 years. No birthday cards, no calls, no visits over the holidays. Nothing. And now this. A wedding invitation to a hotel that practically sparkled in the Seattle skyline. Grand Solace. I could see it from my window, opulent, exclusive, the kind of place you needed legacy money or a last name that meant something. I had neither. Not anymore. My name had been struck from theirs like a typo. Yet somehow they wanted me back, but not really. Not to welcome me. Not to apologize. No, they wanted me there for optics. For a photo. For a show. But they forgot who I'd become in the years they tried to erase me. They forgot that I had built a business from the scraps they left me with, crafted a life with a man who loved me fiercely, and found a version of myself that didn't require their approval to feel whole. That black dress hanging in my closet, the one I'd saved for something meaningful, suddenly had purpose. It wasn't elegant. It was armor. I slipped it off the hanger, feeling the sharp clarity of choice settle in my bones. I wasn't going for closure, and I certainly wasn't going for them. I was going because the girl they kicked out with nothing, but a duffel bag had become a woman with a spine, receipts, and a reason. The wedding wouldn't be the celebration they were hoping for. It would be the stage. My stage. And if they wanted a spectacle, well, they were going to get one. The night before I left for Seattle, sleep didn't come easy. My body stayed still, curled next to Jarrett's warmth, but my mind rewound every scene from the last 12 years. I thought about the diamond necklace, my mother's prized heirloom, that disappeared the day I went to unplug Calla's curling iron. I was 16. I wasn't supposed to be in their room. Calla cried on cue, my father's face darkened with disgust. And just like that, I was branded a thief. Not punished. Erased. I'd never seen a courtroom, but I'd been sentenced anyway. To silence, to isolation, to watching Calla bloom in the spotlight while I withered in the shadows. And when I left for college, desperate for a fresh start, the whispers followed me. My name surfaced on a student blog, anonymously slandering me as a liar, a manipulator. My inbox dried up, professors distanced themselves, and a grant I desperately needed vanished like smoke. No one said it was Calla, but I knew. Her fingerprints were always too careful, too clean. I tried to forget all that, buried it beneath business plans and work schedules and homegrown joy. But When the invitation showed up, it didn't just crack the seal, it cracked open everything. The pain, the rage, the disbelief that even now, after all this time, they could still try to use me like I was disposable. That's when I started collecting proof, not out of vengeance, but for myself. I pulled screenshots of old blog posts, transcripts of interviews where Callum mimicked our mother's phrases like a trained parrot, and financial records that didn't quite add up. Then came the worst of it, a DNA report forged by my own mother to disinherit me, to claim I wasn't her daughter. The lie was clinical, cold, and irreversible. It didn't matter that it was fake. It had done what it was meant to do, erase me. I traced it all. The fake clinic that closed 3 years later, the shell accounts, the payment logs. Jareth helped. Quietly. Without judgment. One transaction stood out. $5,000 to a P.O. box weeks before the DNA report was filed. The sender? Vivian Moore. My mother. That was the nail in the coffin. She hadn't just abandoned me. She orchestrated my annihilation. But it wasn't going to be clean. Not anymore. I drafted a message short and final. I know about the test. I know about the lie. Undo it, or I will make it public. No threats. Just truth with a spine. The silence that followed wasn't mine to carry anymore. When I walked into that ballroom at the Grand Solace, every step was deliberate. Heads turned, glasses paused midair, and my mother's hand twitched around her flute like she'd seen a ghost. Desmond froze. Calla cracked. I didn't come to beg. I came to reclaim. And when I raised my glass and asked Calla about her medical credentials, the room turned with me. Desmond's face went pale. My mother stood, barked something sharp, and I silenced her with 5 words. You forged a DNA test. That was the moment the entire charade collapsed. But it didn't end there. Because this wasn't just about a wedding. This was about everything they stole. My name, my future, my identity. And so I kept going. Evidence to watchdogs. Emails to hospitals. Screenshots to the right inboxes. Calla's fake credentials? Exposed. Her past malpractice? Reopened. The blog posts? Connected to her IP address. The IRS? Looping in. My silence, the one they mistook for surrender, had become a megaphone. They hadn't just cast me out. They used my name to fund fraud. And when it all came crashing down, I didn't gloat. I didn't shout. I simply stood. Steady. Unapologetic. Because the truth doesn't need permission. It doesn't need permission to breathe, to burn, or to begin again. The silence that followed my sister's meltdown at her wedding wasn't the end. It was only the second act. Because what most people didn't know, what the pictures and public shaming didn't reveal, was that Calla's lies didn't just end at a fake degree or a forged narrative. No, the web she spun went deeper. It wasn't until I received an anonymous email at 6:14 a.m. that I realized just how much further this had gone. One line, I remember you. You deserve to know what really happened with Cal's suspension. And an attached hospital report turned my world on its axis again. There it was, black and white, from a Seattle pediatric facility. A misadministered epinephrine dose by attending Dr. Kamor. My sister. It left a child in a coma, and it was quietly swept under the rug. Reading the report didn't bring satisfaction. It brought fury. How many families had trusted her? How many parents had no idea that the woman treating their children was only licensed on paper and lies? I couldn't stay quiet, not anymore. I encrypted the files twice, took every digital precaution I knew, and sent them off to 3 independent watchdog sites. No name, no return email. I didn't need credit. I needed justice. And yet, I wasn't done. That incident, what she did to that boy, and how it was buried, wasn't just a scandal. It was institutional, rot, enabled by people who should have known better. So, I opened another email, This one to Dr. Thomas Kellner, the residency director who had reinstated Calla without a hearing. My subject line was simple: more residency reinstatement. Clarification needed. Inside, I included screenshots, redacted records, and a pointed question. Would you like to explain how this was approved without protocol? I didn't expect a reply. Institutions rarely respond with words. They respond with silence and sudden changes. By the next morning, Calla's bio disappeared from the hospital website. Her social media accounts were scrubbed. News trickled onto Twitter, then caught fire on health forums. Why was Dr. Calla Moore removed from the pediatric center? Speculation mounted. My inbox stayed quiet, but my heart beat steady. I hadn't exposed her out of vengeance. I did it because that boy deserved someone to stand up for him. Because I'd been silenced once, and I knew how long that silence could echo through your bones. Vivian came to my apartment that afternoon. I didn't have to guess who it was. Her knock was a performance in itself. Sharp, rhythmic, urgent. I opened the door to find her dressed like grief in designer silk. Her eyes were hard, her lips pressed too tightly together, like the truth might escape if she relaxed. "You've gone too far," she said before even stepping inside. I said nothing as I stepped aside and let her in. She whirled around in my living room, arms crossed, scanning the place like she couldn't believe I had built something clean without her. "This is your sister's wedding week," she hissed. "You are destroying her life." I tilted my head. "No," I said softly. "She destroyed her own. I'm just letting the light in." She glared. "You always have to be the martyr, don't you? Always painting yourself as the victim." I crossed my arms. "Funny, considering you faked a DNA test to cut me out of a will. That's not martyrdom. That's survival." Her mouth opened, then shut. Behind her, Gregory appeared in the hallway, silent for once. His face didn't hold anger. It held something closer to regret, or maybe realization. For a moment, just one, I saw recognition in his eyes. Maybe he finally saw what he'd allowed all these years. But Vivian, she never broke character. "You think this makes you powerful?" she spat. "Being vindictive doesn't make you righteous." I opened the door. "Telling the truth doesn't make me vindictive," I said. "It makes me free." She stood there for a heartbeat, then another, before storming past me into the hallway. I didn't watch her go. After she left, I called the number from the email. The woman on the other end, Teresa, the nurse, answered cautiously. I thanked her. She exhaled shakily. "I couldn't say anything back then," she said, "but someone needed to, and I'm glad it was you." I nodded into the silence. Me too. But the storm hadn't passed yet. That same week, Jarrett's audit team uncovered something I never expected. While I had been scraping by in my early 20s, working night shifts, surviving off gas station coffee and boxed noodles, someone had been using my name. The Moore Family Clinic had tied me to consulting work I never did, payments I never received, and tax filings that were entirely falsified. The IRS would have come for me next year if Jarrett's firm hadn't flagged it first. For shell companies, dozens of transactions, years of theft hidden behind my name like a financial firewall. I stared at the spreadsheet. They didn't just cut me out. I said quietly. They used me. Jarrett stood behind me, jaw clenched. They used your name to protect themselves. If this had blown up before, you would have taken the fall. That was the last piece. The final straw. I didn't cry. I acted. The Moore Foundation Gala was that weekend. Black tie, media covered, packed with legacy donors and polished smiles. I didn't have an invitation. I didn't need one. I wore black, again, not for elegance, but armor, and slipped through the side door like a shadow with purpose. Gregory was mid-speech, praising their unwavering commitment to medical ethics when I walked onto the stage. The room went silent. Faces turned. My mother paled. Calla blinked, like she couldn't believe I existed in 3 dimensions. I didn't flinch. Before you donate tonight, I said, voice calm, you might want to know where your money's been going. I handed a USB to the tech. Screens around the ballroom lit up, bank logs, fake signatures, my name. Gasps. Murmurs. These documents are falsified, Gregory tried to say. But Jareth stepped forward. They're not. Originals have already been submitted to the IRS and Attorney General. And Desmond, yes, even Desmond spoke to, and to the medical board. He said, because I won't stand behind fraud anymore. The ballroom erupted. Vivian tried to speak. Calla reached for her, but no one moved with them. Their empire collapsed in real time. And I just stood there, steady as stone. That night, I didn't stay for dessert. Outside, the air was cold but honest. For once, it didn't feel like it might turn against me. It felt clean. The quiet that followed the gala wasn't the eerie kind that comes after an explosion. It was the kind that settles after a fire finally dies out. For the first time in years, my phone wasn't ringing with accusations or fake apologies. There were no cryptic voicemails from my mother, no blocked number texts from Calla, no reporters parked outside my apartment door. Just silence. And not the kind I used to fear. This silence felt clean, earned, like the air after a heavy rain finally washes the smoke from a burned-down building. I woke up, stretched my arms toward a sunbeam cutting through the blinds, and didn't flinch. There was no dread, no racing thoughts, just peace. I stepped onto the balcony barefoot, coffee mug in hand, robe tied loose around my waist. The city still moved below me, cars honking, buses rumbling, life marching forward. But up here, it was as if time paused to give me a moment of clarity. I took a slow sip. This was what healing looked like. Not fireworks, not applause, just the quiet realization that no one could write my story but me anymore. The voicemail was still on my phone, though. Vivian's voice. I hadn't deleted it. I don't know why. I wasn't clinging to it out of hope. Maybe I kept it as a final reminder of who I used to be. I tapped play. Her voice came through tight, brittle like a vase about to crack. You've humiliated us. You'll regret this. I don't know who you think you are, but you will answer for what you've done. But it wasn't the words that got me. It was the slight break in her voice at the end. Not remorse, not love, just control, crumbling. Calla never called. No text, no fake reconciliation, not even a passive-aggressive email through a burner account. She'd left the city quietly. I heard, probably hoping to rebuild her name somewhere no one had heard it before. I didn't wish her harm. I didn't wish her anything, because that's what healing does. It strips away the need for revenge and leaves you with something far more powerful: detachment. Desmond surprised me, though. He sent one message, just 5 words. I didn't know. I'm sorry. I stared at the screen for a long time before replying. I know. I believe you, but I don't need anything from you anymore. And I meant it. Closure wasn't something someone else could give me. It was something I had to create for myself. News moved fast. Gregory's medical license was suspended. The clinic was frozen, pending a full federal and IRS audit. The Moore Foundation was suddenly restructuring. Vivian? She went dark. No media appearances. No charity functions. No statements. She retreated the only way someone like her knows how. Silently, but strategically. But silence wasn't power anymore. Not in my world. Not after everything. I heard rumors about Calla, how she was applying to research positions in smaller towns, how she might be going under a different last name. It didn't matter. That part of the story wasn't mine to carry anymore. I had let go. I wasn't watching out of pettiness. I was simply observing, like someone standing safely behind a glass window, watching the storm they just walked out of finally pass. One afternoon, I walked into my office. Yes, my office. The one I built with sleepless nights, long shifts, and nothing but my own grit. My team smiled at me like they always had, with warmth, respect, and zero fear. There were no whispers behind my back. No one was waiting for me to fall. Just people doing meaningful work together. That alone felt like a miracle. That evening, Miriam showed up at my apartment. She was the first person who ever believed in me, my first real boss. The woman who handed me a broom when I was 17 and homeless instead of judging me. She brought sunflowers, my favorite. "You made it out," she said, her voice breaking just slightly. I told her. There was no air left in there. Later that night, Jareth sat across the dinner table from me, quiet but steady, like he always is. He didn't say much, but then he never had to. "You did what no one else could," he said. "Finally. You gave them every chance. And when they still chose power over love, you didn't let them take you down with them." I nodded. I couldn't speak, not from emotion, but from clarity, because for the first time in my life, I understood something. Justice doesn't always come with a courtroom or a confession. Sometimes justice looks like release. Sometimes it looks like freedom. And freedom doesn't always require forgiveness. That was the part that took me the longest to learn. For years, I thought healing meant reconciling. That peace only came when the other person said, "I'm sorry." But now I know peace comes when you decide to stop needing that apology, when you stop begging people to love you better, and start loving yourself like your life depends on it, because it does. I no longer need to explain myself. I no longer fear being the difficult one. I no longer feel guilty for choosing distance over dysfunction. My boundaries are not bridges, they're fences, strong, necessary, and built to protect the life I've rebuilt from ashes they once tried to bury me under. They'll never admit what they did. Vivian will go to her grave pretending she did it all to protect the family. Calla will probably rewrite her story again, this time painting herself as the misunderstood genius. And that's fine, because the truth doesn't need their permission. It lives in the open now. It breathes, just like I do. This isn't the ending I once imagined. It's better, because it's mine. So if you're reading this and your story looks anything like mine, if you've ever been cast aside, silenced, or told that your pain was too inconvenient, I want you to hear this clearly. You don't owe anyone your silence. You don't have to keep carrying the weight they dropped on you. You don't have to protect people who never protected you. You are allowed to step away, to start over, to speak up, and most of all, to thrive without ever hearing, "I'm sorry." Because forgiveness is powerful, but freedom is everything. There's a difference between being left behind and being deliberately erased. And when I finally held that audit file in my hands, thick with transactions, shell accounts, and forged authorizations, I realized my family hadn't just disowned me. They'd exploited me while they did it. The documents weren't flashy. They weren't covered in red stamps or urgent signatures. But they were devastating. They were quiet weapons built from my name, my identity, and my trust. I'd spent years thinking I was invisible, that my absence was merely neglect. But now I understood it was strategy. They hadn't just forgotten me. They had used me, used my name, my social security number, and even my non-existent earnings to funnel money and shield themselves from scrutiny, all while I was scraping together rent and living off store-brand peanut butter. The first fraudulent transaction had occurred when I was 19, living in a basement studio with mold on the ceiling and 2 roommates I barely knew. That year, according to their doctored tax filings, I'd earned over $42,000 in consulting fees. The reality? I didn't even have a desk. I was tutoring biology on weekends and pulling double shifts at a local cafe. But on paper, I was a financial firewall, someone they could hide behind while pretending to operate above board. I remember standing in my living room, file folder open on the counter, Jareth reading page after page beside me. I couldn't feel my legs. They tied your identity to at least 4 shell accounts. He said quietly, if this hadn't been flagged in a forensic sweep, the IRS would have come after you next year. My mouth was dry. So not only did they erase me from the family, they kept the parts of me they could use. He nodded. And if this blows up the way I think it will, they're going to try and spin it. Say you had no idea. Paint you as unstable. Try to flip the narrative again. But I wasn't scared. Not anymore. Because what terrified me more than exposure was continuing to live under the weight of their secrets. I moved fast. The annual Moore Foundation Gala was scheduled for that weekend. Black tie, invite only, media heavy, packed with Seattle's elite. And I didn't have an invitation. I didn't need one. They had taken so much from me, but they forgot that I had one thing left, the truth. And the truth has no RSVP. I wore black, not for mourning, but for clarity. A sleeveless gown with clean lines and no apologies. I slipped in through a side entrance just as the waitstaff was setting down the final course. Gregory was mid-speech when I stepped onto the stage. He didn't recognize me at first, but Vivian did. Her hand froze around her crystal wine glass. Calla went pale. Desmond blinked like he was trying to convince himself it wasn't really me. I didn't flinch. I took the mic. Before you donate tonight, I said, voice calm and steady, you might want to know where your money's really going. There was a beat of silence, then murmurs as I handed a USB drive to the AV tech. The ballroom screens flickered to life. Spreadsheets, emails, bank transfers, all tied to the Moore Clinic. Every dollar traced. Every fake signature exposed. One document in particular drew gasps. A consulting contract signed under my name. I hadn't been in that building for over a decade. This is doctored. Gregory tried to protest, stepping forward. But Jareth appeared in the crowd, arms folded, calm as ever. Actually, they're not, he said. Our firm has submitted the original documents to the IRS and the State Attorney General's office. Gregory's mouth snapped shut. Then Desmond stood up. And to the medical licensing board, he added, because I won't stand behind frauds anymore. Vivian, ever the queen of composure, tried to salvage it. She reached for Calla's hand, but Calla yanked it away. How could you drag me into this? She hissed, her voice cracking in the mix range. And just like that, the entire room turned. Donors whispering. Press snapping photos. The once untouchable Moore family was unraveling under chandeliers they'd clung to for decades. I didn't stay to enjoy the fallout. I wasn't there for revenge. I was there for truth. And once it was out, I had no interest in watching them scramble. Outside, the air was cool. Not cold, refreshing. I walked down the sidewalk, my heels tapping a rhythm of release against the stone. For years, they tried to keep me quiet, to brand me the unstable one. But now their empire was cracking, not because I burned it, but because I stopped holding it up. 2 days later, Vivian showed up at my door. She didn't knock, she banged. I opened it slowly, calmly, and stepped aside. You've gone too far, she spat as she walked in, trembling with rage. No, I said, arms crossed. I've gone far enough. You're destroying your sister's life. She put a child into a coma. I snapped back. And you buried it, just like you buried me. You don't understand the pressure. No, you don't get to twist this, I said, voice rising. You faked a DNA test. You erased me from the family. You let them think I was a mistake. And now you're mad. I finally made myself seen. Behind her, Gregory appeared in the hallway. But for the first time, he said nothing. No lectures. No corrections. Just silence. Vivian's eyes narrowed. You think this makes you powerful? No, I said, walking toward the door. But telling the truth makes me free. She stood frozen, stunned by the clarity in my voice. She wasn't expecting me to be whole, but I was, and I wasn't done. Later that day, I called the nurse from the anonymous email. Teresa, the one who had sent me the hospital report about Cala's patient. Thank you, I said, my voice shaking slightly. Someone had to speak up, she replied. I just didn't expect it to be the sister. Neither did they, I said, but now they know I'm not afraid to speak. I always thought justice would feel louder, like courtroom drama or flashing headlines. But when I stood in the center of the Moore Foundation Gala with a microphone in one hand and a USB in the other, it wasn't anger that filled me. It was clarity. Cold, complete, irreversible clarity. They thought I was still the broken girl they left behind, but I had returned with every receipt, every forged transfer, every falsified tax document, and I wasn't just telling my story. I was dismantling theirs. They used my name. While I was sleeping in moldy apartments and tutoring students to make rent, my family, my mother Vivian, my sister Cala, and Gregory, our father and title, only used my identity to file tax returns, collect reimbursements, and funnel money through shell foundations. I was a ghost, but a convenient one. One they could sign off on while pretending I didn't exist. Jareth, my partner, the one man who never flinched at my truth, helped uncover the paper trail. He stood behind me as I walked into that ballroom, calm as stone. We didn't speak. We didn't need to. He knew what this night meant. Gregory was in the middle of a speech, waxing poetic about community and legacy when I stepped onto the stage. The silence was instant. People gasped. Silverware paused midair. Eyes widened. Vivian's lips parted in protest, but no sound came out. Cala turned white as linen. I raised the mic. Before you donate tonight, I began, my voice steady. You might want to know where your money's really been going. The ballroom screens lit up behind me, spreadsheets, email threads, payment logs, all tied to the Moore Clinic and the Moore Foundation. My name was on every file, listed as the primary consultant. The crowd murmured louder. A woman clutched her pearls. A man leaned closer to his tablet, squinting. Gregory stepped forward. This is some sort of mistake. They're not fake, Jareth said, emerging from the crowd, crisp in his navy suit. We've submitted the originals to the IRS and the Attorney General's office. Another voice rose, Desmond, once my sister's fiancé, now her silent witness. And to the medical board, he added, because I won't stand behind frauds anymore. Vivian tried to regain control. This is a misunderstanding, she said, gripping the mic. It's a technical issue. Rowena is confused. No, I said, shaking my head slowly. I'm not confused. You used my name to shield your corruption. You signed away my existence, forged my DNA test, and removed me from my grandfather's will. And now you want to act like you're the victim. Cala stood frozen. Desmond turned to her. Did you know? He asked, voice low. Were you part of this? She didn't answer. He dropped his champagne glass onto the marble floor. You built your career on a lie, on her life. Vivian reached for Cala's hand, but Cala pulled away. How could you let this happen? She whispered. How could you let it get this far? I didn't do anything, Cala snapped. That's exactly the problem, Desmond said. Then, without another word, he walked out. The crowd shifted. Conversations turned. A wave of murmurs built into a crescendo of whispers. The Moore family, once untouchable, had crumbled in real time. I didn't stay for the fallout. I walked out through the front doors, my heels echoing against marble like a heartbeat slowing down. The night air was crisp, a wind curling around my shoulders like the first exhale after a storm. For the first time in over a decade, I felt the weight lift. 2 days later, Vivian showed up at my door. No warning, just a pounding fist and fury behind her eyes. "You've gone too far," she spat. "This was your sister's wedding week." "No," I said calmly. "This is accountability week. She's losing everything. She put a child in a coma, and you covered it up." I replied, "You're not losing anything you didn't steal. You think this makes you righteous? Vindictive?" "No, but it makes me free." Behind her, Gregory stood silent. For the first time in his life, he had nothing to say. That silence said more than his cruelty ever did. Vivian's voice shook. "You always needed attention." "No," I replied, stepping forward. "I needed to matter. And when I stopped trying to matter to you, I finally found myself." She left, her heels clicking down the hallway like the retreat of a queen without her crown. Later that evening, I called the nurse who had sent the anonymous hospital file, the one that revealed Kala's negligence, the pediatric patient she almost killed, the buried report that never made the news. "Thank you," I said. She paused. Someone had to say something. None of them expected it to be me. I whispered. "And that's why it had to be," she replied. Justice wasn't loud. It wasn't a punch or a press release. It was this quiet, precise, permanent. And yet it wasn't over. A few days later, an audit revealed the full scope, over a dozen fraudulent filings using my name, IRS returns I never received, and shell accounts created to protect the Moore family's assets from liability. All tied to me. The Moore name was under federal investigation. Vivian vanished from public life. Kala was suspended from her hospital. Gregory's clinic was frozen pending financial review. But me, I wasn't broken. I was breathing. I opened my boutique downtown, the one I'd dreamed of for years, and watched real people walk through my door. No whispers, no shadows, just sunlight and fresh air. And then the message came, from Desmond. I didn't know. "I'm sorry." I stared at it for a long time, then typed back, "I know, but I don't need anything from you anymore." Letting go didn't come with a dramatic ending. No final scream. No door slam. It came with peace. Because justice isn't about taking them down. It's about rising without needing them to fall. They burned the bridge. I made sure it stayed down. And I never looked back. 2 weeks after everything fell apart, my life was quieter than it had ever been. But it wasn't the silence of loneliness or the eerie stillness after a storm. This was a peaceful quiet, the kind that settles into your bones when you know you've finally stopped running, finally stopped explaining, finally stopped trying to earn love that was never freely given. I woke up to sunlight stretching across my bedroom floor, my coffee warm in my hand, and the crisp morning air kissing my skin as I stepped barefoot onto the balcony. For the first time in over a decade, I didn't flinch at the idea of a new day. No lawyers. No reporters. No family screaming through voicemails. Just me and that humming realization that I was finally free. I hadn't heard from Vivian, not since she stood at my doorstep, fire in her eyes, venom in her voice, and guilt curling behind her rage like smoke behind glass. She didn't come to apologize. She came to warn me, to silence me, to remind me of the hierarchy she thought still existed. But it didn't. Not anymore. I had burned that ladder, and with it, every ounce of power they thought they held over me. Kala never called. Not one word. Not even a performative apology or some weak attempt at saving face. I didn't expect her to. Her silence was confirmation of guilt, of shame, of the unraveling she never saw coming. Desmond, though, surprised me. He sent one simple message. "I didn't know. I'm sorry." I read it over a dozen times before replying. "I know. I believe you. But I don't need anything from you anymore." And I meant it, because forgiveness and freedom don't always live in the same house. And I had finally found my own home inside myself. Gregory's medical license had been suspended. The Moore Clinic was frozen pending investigation. The IRS was combing through 12 years of fraud, one wire transfer at a time. Vivian had gone dark. No charity galas, no press statements, no brunch interviews with carefully staged floral backdrops. Her silence now was the most honest thing she'd ever offered the world. And Kala, word was she'd left the city. Quietly, the way a coward retreats when the curtain finally drops and the mask won't hold. Maybe she's in some small town now, pretending to be someone else. Or maybe she's just sitting in a room somewhere, finally realizing the cost of building a life on stolen light. But I wasn't celebrating. I wasn't gloating. I was healing. And healing isn't loud. It's not fireworks or Instagram captions or viral videos. It's the quiet click of your door locking behind you at night and knowing no one inside will betray you. It's sipping coffee in the morning without anxiety curling in your chest. It's not checking your phone because you're expecting a fight. It's not checking at all. That afternoon, I walked into my office, my own business, my own name on the lease, my own staff who didn't whisper behind my back, but looked me in the eye. They greeted me not with obligation or fear, but with warmth, respect, familiarity, no shame, no lies. Later that evening, Miriam came by, my first real boss, the woman who handed me a broom at 17 when I had nothing, no family, no money, no direction. She brought sunflowers, bright, unapologetically yellow. "You made it out," she said, her voice cracking just slightly. "I had to," I replied, voice soft but grounded. There was no air left in there. At dinner, Jareth took my hand. He didn't say much. He didn't need to. "You did what no one else could," he finally whispered. "You gave them every chance. And when they still chose power over love, you didn't let them take you down with them." I nodded, my throat too full to answer, because he was right. I had spent years thinking justice had to look like punishment, that vindication had to mean retribution. But I was starting to understand something deeper. Maybe justice looks like release, like finally putting down the burden they made you carry, like never again needing their validation to feel whole. And forgiveness? Maybe forgiveness isn't always necessary to move forward. Maybe letting go doesn't require an apology. Sometimes peace comes not from hearing, "I'm sorry," but from no longer needing to. They will never say sorry. Vivian will never confess to what she did. She will always twist it into a sob story, how hard it was to be a single mother under scrutiny, how I was too wild, too emotional, too off-brand. Kala will never admit she stole my research, slandered me anonymously, and tried to erase my entire existence because I stood in the way of her curated spotlight. But I don't need them to say it, because I already know it, and that knowing that truth is enough. They tried to shape me into something they could control. A shadow, a scapegoat, a silence. And for a long time, I played that part. I performed. I tried to make them proud. I smiled in the photos, swallowed the pain, and told myself it was love. It wasn't. It was survival. But now I don't need to survive. I get to live. Truly, fully, joyfully. With people who see me. With work that reflects me. With mornings that feel like beginnings, not battlegrounds. With love that doesn't ask me to shrink or perform or prove my worth. They may never pay for what they did the way I once hoped, but they've lost the one thing they never expected to miss. Access to me. My story. My presence. My legacy. Because the girl they erased, she built an empire in their silence. And she's not disappearing ever again. This story delivers powerful lessons about identity, betrayal, and the courage it takes to reclaim your truth. Rowena's journey reminds us that silence in the face of injustice only serves those who benefit from it. True peace comes not from being the bigger person by staying quiet, but from choosing yourself even when it means standing alone. The story shows that family isn't defined by blood, but by respect, and that you are allowed to walk away when love is conditional. Forgiveness is healing, but sometimes freedom is the bigger gift. If this story touched something in you, if you've ever felt erased, silenced, or underestimated, you're not alone. You are allowed to take up space, to speak up, and to rebuild on your own terms. If you felt empowered by this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and drop a comment below to share your thoughts. We'd love to hear your story too. Your voice matters here.